Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of GovCon Heroes, Talent Unleashed, your go-to destination for insightful discussions on talent acquisition and sourcing in the dynamic world of government contracting, with a special focus, as always, on the cleared sector. So glad to have you guys joining us today. Please welcome myself, Junius Currier, my co-host, Justen Baxter, and our esteemed guest, Ben, formerly officially known as Benjamin Mena, but goes by Ben. And he was gracious enough to join us today, and really excited, Ben, to have you on. And for those that don't know, he's the co-founder of Select Source Solutions. Ben and his team specializes in connecting companies that are transforming and protecting our world with top talent in data science, cybersecurity, among other things. And as Select Source Solutions, they understand that people are the driving force behind impactful results. And so I'm really happy to have Ben join us to share his perspectives on recruiting in the cleared industry, but from the staffing side. So Ben, welcome. Welcome to the episode of GovCon Heroes, man. Glad to have you.
I'm so excited to be here. Government contracting, GovCon, the cleared recruiting space. I'll just say this, it's a space of passion. It's a space where we understand the mission. If we wanted easier money, we'd be somewhere else.
That's for sure. That's for sure. You know, that kind of came up. I'm glad that you brought that up, because that came up quite a bit at the Clearance Jobs Connect conference. What was that, on the 3rd? So about 2 weeks ago. Excuse me. And it was really interesting. You know, that kind of that theme, right, kept coming up. Like, hey, people in our industry, they care about the mission, right? Like, when we hire people, we're hiring people that are, they're doing very important stuff to keep the citizens of our nation safe and to enhance the lives. Like, because a lot of times, we'll talk about, GovCon is big, right? It's not just clear agencies. It's also, CivGov agencies, right? And all of that work is to the betterment of our U.S. citizens, or to protect our U.S. citizens and to protect democracy abroad, right? So, I really was struck by that, and I walked away feeling rejuvenated by that mission, because it is a higher call, and and that's not to denigrate any other industry, whether you're commercial. That's not what that's about. But that is, when we reach out to candidates and we start talking about, like, hey, what you're supporting, for us, we get bought into that. We're passionate about that, right? Like, because it does appeal to that personal ethos that you may have about, hey, what's important to you as a human being? Like, what do you want to be a part of, right? Like, that's the reason why people get into the military service, right? Like, that sense of belonging and wanting to be a part of something greater than themselves. And we inherently have that same capability when we talk to people to place them in positions that have significant impact. And I think sometimes when we're in it for so long, we lose that enthusiasm. And going to that conference, I walked out of there like someone punched me in the head again and said, did you forget why you got into this? And I walked away feeling like on fire, like, hey, you know what? Refocused and excited about what it is that we do. I don't know. What did you think? Like, how did you feel about that? Because I don't know if it was you who said it or someone else, but like, you were definitely a part of that when that came up. I know you were in the room at least.
It's one of those things that when you're in those like proposal meetings, and you're like, it's on a Sunday night, and you're trying to find that one person to get the LOI, and you've already put in about 70 to 85 hours of work this week. You're just like, why the hell am I in this industry? Why the hell am I doing this? Like, I could just be working at Facebook. I could be working at, Google, with all these fancy perks, and without the stress of the entire mission is on the back of me as a recruiter. But it was just like, like you said, it was just like rejuvenating to hear, like, hey, if we don't do our job as recruiters, like, recruiters are the engine of government contracting. We're the ones that actually make things happen. We're the ones that staff up these entire programs. We're the ones that find those software developers. We're the ones that find those Intel analysts. We are the ones that are like, if we don't find that right person, our friends are impacted, could potentially be impacted with their lives. So it was so refreshing to just be around a bunch of recruiters that just like, even though we're competitors, we're at different companies, like we're internal versus external, we're on the same mission to get these programs staffed up for our country.
Yeah.
No,
Totally agree with that.
yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, I concur with Ben and you wholeheartedly. And I think taking it a step further, when we have the conversations, especially for folks that are, having to work in skiff, long hours, deployed, opponents, who knows if they've been shot at or maybe they're experiencing PTSD. I mean, there's an emotional element while we sit here remote or in an office, making phone calls, cold calling, doing our x-raying, whatever we're doing, whatever, I mean, it's gobbledygook. But in the end, like, those conversations, I mean, they're worn down. They haven't seen their kid all day. They haven't talked to their wife, their girlfriend, their husband. If you're getting somebody a CONUS, you're getting them off deployment. So, it's Wolf of Wall Street meets Mission. So it's New York meets DC. So when you look at it in the broader sense, yeah, it's real. And if all of us came in and felt greater mission in what we do every day, we would do better at what we do as recruiters. And I'm glad you guys mentioned,
I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, you're sitting in the seat as a recruiter day after day, and it's just like many of us lose the realization of the value that we have as recruiters.
Yeah.
And what we do, like, you guys have worked at some of the biggest companies out there. Like, I've worked at some of the biggest companies out there. Like, the program doesn't get staffed up if it wasn't for us. These companies could lose these major hundreds of millions of dollars contracts if the recruiters don't get it staffed up. So it's just like taking a few steps back and like understanding the value that we bring as recruiters, the impact that we have as recruiters. And like I said, like, if it wasn't for I remember those early days at Lockheed Martin, like I was so frustrated in the 30 to 35 hours of meetings I was stuck in per week. But I had to reframe my thoughts and you know what? I need to go find that software developer for that missile defense system. If I don't find that, my buddy overseas in Afghanistan could be impacted. And it's just like reframing this. And like, here's a super cool thing that us GovCon recruiters can do compared to every other recruiter. The economic value that we have brought to the table is easier to quantify than other places.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the ROI.
Yeah.
I mean, just this.
Oh, yeah.
We support FEMA here at CERCA. And so we have a need. We had to hire up X number of people for disaster recovery to support the hurricane. So guess what? Me and my team put that on our back. And, that's non-clear. It's still GovCon. And, they're going down there and these people are going to save lives. They're going to help lives, and I'm not doing a promotion here from our organization, but I'm just saying it's impacts like that, which have a direct connection to, as Ben was saying, lives on the ground. And that's non-military, but still.
And yeah, I mean, we have contracts with FEMA too, right? So that's what I was kind of talking about earlier about not everything has to be necessarily like MilGov. Yeah. So that's cool.
And to take that one step further, like, I'm just going to throw some numbers out there, Justen.
Anyway,
we'll say that contract's $100 million contract. You completely get that staffed up. Like, now on your personal achievement list, your brag list, that's 100 million. How many times have you done that? Like, we're looking at the amount of contracts I've impacted and filled, it's over $1 billion. And I think that's the thing that a lot of GovCon recruiters fail to realize is the value. Like, sit down and analyze the value that you've brought to the table over how many years that you've been in this space. You can actually quantify it.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So a couple of thoughts that come to my mind is how important pre-award recruiting is.
Oh yeah.
For government contracts. Because to your point, right? Like,
man,
and it's like a bean, and it's funny when I first got into government recruiting. I kind of wanted to work on the sold and funded stuff, right? And the reason why you want to work on the sold and funded stuff is because that it's guaranteed that you're going to make it higher, right? Because we're looking at it from a metrics standpoint.
Yeah.
But as you mature and you start to understand the financial impact of your role, and you try to become more of a strategic talent advisor as opposed to just, I'm a recruiter and I just fill positions, right? Like, you want to be able to show to the business why you're valuable to the organization. And to your point, Ben, when you were working on let's just say it's a $50 million contract or $100 million or whatever, and you get the keys for that contract and you win the award, right? To your point, you can now say, hey, I was a part of I identified the key personnel that is part of the selection criteria for this proposal. And as a result, we got that $50 million contract. So that's one feather in the cap. The other feather in the cap is the staffing piece of it, where you fill all of the positions. And if and here's the really biggest thing too, right? So there's filling the positions, contract. But what about the revenue, right? Like, how do you quantify the revenue? Well, if your organization's, revenue generated per hire, you can just calculate how many hires you made to be able to say, this year I helped the organization generate millions of dollars worth of revenue, right?
Yeah.
We actualize that opportunity cost, right? Because it's one thing to have a position that you can get, but to actually capture it and fill it, now it's actually a tangible thing that, the business not only has the revenue, but they can start evaluating profitability, right? And managing that program and all that. And I'll take it even a step further. I like jump balls, best athlete position. I know a lot of people don't like those, right? Because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm competing. But for every one of those positions that you capture, you're adding revenue to the organization that you're supporting that they did not have a contract win on, right? Like, they might be a part of a teaming partner and there's an opportunity there. And we all know there's various levels of teaming, right? Like, there's like the solidified, codified, we have a team agreement in place and we're going to get X percentage of net share. And that's what those are good, right? Then there's you could be a teaming partner. And we got some positions that we haven't been able to fill. And we're all trying to fill them. So if you get one, we'll see what happens, right? If you capture one or two of those and it costs you, and for every position, your organization makes $250,000 worth of revenue on that role, you've now helped your organization make $750,000.
Yep.
Like, that's not chump change, right? And that's how, to your point, you can put that on your resume or whatever. But when you are doing your numbers and your evaluation, you can go back and say, here's what I contributed to the success of our company, right? And I think that's a powerful thing. That's one of the things I learned early on that was super important for me in my development. I'm sure you guys agree.
Yeah. And I would say I also like I call it hero staffing. So hero staffing, I'll give you my definition of that, but is protecting our house. And by that I mean it drops off, you get a cure notice, or you're gonna lose the contract. So I like to play hero staffing. That is the best place to be because you can quantify you're gonna lose a $20 million program if we don't staff this or these KPs because of this, or you're not going to execute on your contractual obligations. That really is rubber meets the road. So I call that hero staffing. Love that. Been in that 15 plus years. Always deliver, right? Always deliver. You work over the weekend, you got to support 3-letter agency. And if you don't staff for that, the impacts are not just mission, but we can talk financials, but it's also, they need that guy or gal in that role, or maybe they need someone to deploy. So from that sense, I like the hero staffing role, even though it's nerve wracking, as an athlete, it's like, that's clutch. That's fourth quarter, 2 minutes, Jordan's in. Who's going to take the shot? We're going to take the shot. So to me, hero staffing is probably the best place to be. And you can quantify and actualize your ROI directly to that program loss that you prevented. Protect your house.
Yes.
Protect your house.
And you guys are both leaders in this space. You guys have teams. If somebody's coming to you and they just had the resume that looks like every other GovCon recruiter resume out there, or somebody that could actually quantify that in their resume, who are you choosing?
Yeah, I mean, the person that can really show demonstrated results, right? Because that's what it is, right? And that's actually something that I actually am in the midst of doing some interviews. That's one of the things that I kind of look for is, like, walk me through, like, as a recruiter, right? Like, everything's a numbers, like, everything, like, how many, like, top of the funnel, like, how many submissions, right? And how many submissions led to an interview? How many submissions led to an offer, right? Like, you have to have KPIs to understand your own personal metrics to know, like, how to plan your week. Like, if hey, I usually need to submit 3 people to get an interview, and my goal this week is to get 5 submits, then you already know, like, what you need to be doing this week in order to get the throughput to the outcome that you're looking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it amazes me how often when, I'll talk to, recruiters or sourcers, and they don't necessarily know what the metrics are. And to me, it's always been kind of like, that's interesting. So how do you know
Yeah.
if there's not an area of improvement? Like,
Yeah.
how do you get better if you're not measuring yourself, right? Like,
Well,
like, to me, it doesn't make sense. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys
I
see
came
that?
from the agency cloth. I think Ben came from agency cloth. So you know your
I came
number.
from sales.
Yeah, same thing, right? So
Yeah.
if
Right.
you came from agency and you had to eat what you kill, you're going to know your numbers. It's Wolf of Wall Street right there. That's Wolf of Wall Street recruitment. So you could tell the difference between only done corporate and agency or sales cloth and then moved into corporate. And I prefer, the latter. So that is a red flag if you don't have some semblance of understanding of what you're saying, Junius. What do I need throughput wise to reach XYZ, right? Even some understanding. It doesn't have to be to the nail. Like it's not an algorithm. I don't need an algorithm, but you better know, hey, it takes 6 to 2. It takes 8 to 3, some ratios, right?
Yeah. I mean, you got to be checking it down. Like,
Yeah,
hey,
we don't need to do
if I'm going
I
to
don't
get.
need ChatGPT for that.
Also, I think another thing to that too, is it also helps you to evaluate your effectiveness, right? Like, if you're like, hey, why is it taking me 5 submissions to get to an interview? Or why does it take me X amount of emails and X amount of calls to get a submission? What can I be doing differently to make it easier on myself to be more effective?
Yep.
So that's why, like, I've always embraced numbers as a way to inform and educate and to improve.
Yep.
Not as like, and I think sometimes there's this thought that numbers, metric data driven environment is punitive. I mean, listen, I know there are organizations out there that will be like, hey, you were away from your desk for 5 minutes to use the restroom longer than you were supposed to. Like, I'm not talking about that extreme. I'm just talking about
that's oligarchs
using. Yeah. I'm talking about using numbers to educate your performance and how you can become more effective in your role. You know what I mean?
And it could be that those numbers indicate some issue in the process that's on the operational side. It's not on you. We're looking at the numbers and saying, you had 10 submittals and you got 2 interviews. Where is the disconnect in that interview process or the feedback?
Yeah. And how long did it take?
Maybe those requirements are actually, we need to look at that and provide data and dig into that. Now we need market intelligence. Now we're being a talent advisor. So the numbers lead to the talent advisory, which leads to an optimization of the process, which will eventually lead to a hire, or we're going to stop working. Right. So that's the nap for you reverse engineer it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ben, I did want to kind of explore a little bit, like, so, you're hearing 2 in-house guys, and I know, Justen, you come from Stafford World.
Yeah.
But, we're kind of talking about those things, but, like,
16 years. So, I mean, it's, I've.
Yeah. So from your perspectives, like, what are some of the similarities and what are some of the differences that you see from your end?
I mean, it's one of the things that, like, we typically get called for is just like when a company needs, like, the absolute help, like we're like the last call of defense. So, it's kind of interesting because we do a process where we like to, like, walk through, like, what have you guys already done? Where have you guys been reaching? How many times do you guys reach out? Because, like, I can't tell you how many times, like, companies call us and, like, we start going into the process and we're like, you don't need us. Like, we can help you real quick to fill this position, but, like, you guys need to analyze, like, what you guys are doing for your recruiting team. It's chaos. Like, you guys aren't even following up with people. Like, I get it. Like, there's systems, there's technologies, there's artificial intelligence, there's all these things. And, like, there's a company right now, my wife took over. She's like, actually building out the recruiting infrastructure. You have a good recruiter, you have like the tools. Let's just set you up with a tech so that way your recruiter's superpowered. Because like I remember this like when I was like before all these systems, like when I would like send out an email, send out a phone call, I'd put it in the system, and then like the next day I'd be like, wait, who did I reach out to again? Like, what about this? I'm just, as a recruiter, you just go. So, use AI to kind of like back in some stuff. But like kind of going back to like the original like question, like what am I seeing different is like we're seeing the same pain points. It's like we're all chasing the same people. The only thing, like the biggest thing that we have availability wise is like I hate to say this, like many times we're just a little more hungrier than the internal recruiter. A lot of times the internal recruiting teams, like, if they're in the office, if they're in the office, they're in the office from 8 to 5. If you're in the GovCon, the cleared space, you can't get a hold of people between 8 and 5. So like, what is your recruiter doing during that time? Like kicking them out of the office, tell them they call us at night or make them on the weekend and don't have them sit around for 45 hours in meetings. So we're a little more hungrier. We really take advantage of like in the GovCon space, that 5 to 7 window in the evenings. And also like Sundays, man, I can get a hold of almost everybody on Sundays. It's phenomenal.
I had a sourcer who worked for me to that point, and she did only full scopes, and she would load up submits from Friday to Sunday. Friday to Sunday, time to shine. And I'd come in Monday because she just carved that out. Her husband knew that's when she was going to make those, and she'd been doing it for years, and she would get a hold of every full scope imaginable. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Not many people are willing to carve, not your whole weekend, right? But like carve out that. When I did full scopes, that's all I did. Thursday to Sunday, that's when I would meet all my numbers, and I'd do evenings. I'd be up at 6 a.m. I would do before football Sunday, and I would do Saturday mornings. And I'd carve that out, and I did that for years. That's what it takes to source full scopes, CI polys, or other specialized talent, corporate or agency. So I agree with them.
Yeah.
I hate this.
No, I agree with that. And like,
I'm talking more. DoD probably don't need to do that as much, but Intel, come on.
Yeah. I think it varies based on like, like what line of work your organization is going after. To your point, like I think obviously for full scope poly people, great. But one of the things too that I walked away from the Clearance Jobs Connect conference that I thought was interesting was, they talked about AI quite a bit, and and I'll be honest with you, I don't have AI fatigue. I have fatigue of everything being considered AI when it's not AI, right? Like I think that's kind of like, it's like it's not really
everything's AI,
man. Like everything's AI, right?
It's like, no, that's information, and we could do that for 5 years. It's like
So, but I think there is this maybe thought out there that somehow there's going to be like an easy button to recruiting, right? Like where someone's going to make a tool that is going to uncover, all of the people that have previously been uncovered, figure out a way to create an email that is so thought-provoking that everyone has to respond to it. So there's this thought like, okay, that we can just rely on technology. And the truth of the matter is that most of the submissions that people get is because they either got on the phone with somebody and had a real conversation. Now, you may have used tools to find these people, and I highly recommend that you do, right? Like, make your job easier, use open source intelligence, like use the automation out there to gather information so that way you can effectively reach out. But relying on emails, like that may have worked 5 years ago, for some people, it's not working nowadays. And I tell this to my teams. The reason why is because people get so much stuff. Like, literally people are getting hundreds of emails a day, spam, right? Like they are getting text messages. Everyone's overloaded. Then you just factor in social media, right? So between work, family, personal life, you got like 500 emails coming at you every day that you didn't sign up for, that some information broker sold. You don't even know how they got your information in the first place. And you're hoping that they see your email. Like literally, you're just hoping that they see your email. And so I tell my teams, your best bet is, yeah, you should definitely do sequence emails and all that. Absolutely. You should also do texting. Absolutely. But pick up the phone. You know, like pick up the phone and start calling people, right? Like that's what you need to do. And it's old school, but you know what? There's something to say about those basics, man. Like you need to have the ability as a recruiter or as a sourcer to be able to have conversations with people, to engage them, to understand like what motivates them, why your role is a fit. And that has nothing to do with technology. That has everything to do with you being comfortable, you know, selling your organization, selling your role, uncovering objections, right? And that's that sales aspect that, you know, we kind of talked about. And at that conference, they were like, look, recruiting is sales. And I know some people may like looking at it as like, oh, you're trying to, you know, no. You have to understand what we mean by sales. Like some of the best salespeople I've ever met in my life are some of the most professional people and are not pushy. But what they're really good at is influencing. They're good at understanding when an opportunity is right for a human being or for an organization and when it's not. They don't waste their time trying to sell, you know, a bad opportunity to someone, right? Like they're looking for what are the win-win scenarios. And I think I walked out of that conference like, you know what? I think we need to speak more about that because I think people, they're like, hey, I'm filling positions, but you know, I'm so busy. I'm going to spray and pray. I'm going to reach out to like 500 million people. Someone will respond back to me. And that's taking that human element out of it as opposed to being really intentional and canvassing, really nailing down like who is most likely to be open and interested to this. And those are the people I'm going to attack. I don't know. What do you guys think?
So let me just kind of jump on a few thoughts. Oh, do you want to go first?
No, you can go, Ben. It's cool, man.
So let me just kind of do a few thoughts on this. Like old school is new school now. So get on the phone. The phone is killer. Like I would even add in like video messages into your emails now, just because it helps share. It helps like show you're different than the AI automated generated like messages that just go out to everybody. But here's the thing I think recruiters need to realize. Once there is that easy button, a CEO is going to easy button your way out of there, way out of you. They're going to have like just less recruiters and more tech. So like keep an eye out there with the easy button. Let me just share like what AI looks like right now outside of government contracting. There are AI staffing companies where a manager can like literally just upload a job description into the AI system. The AI system will now go directly start reaching out to candidates in a multi-stage sequence. It'll actually do either a video or an audio like recruiting screen, full AI. Once that's done, if it hits a certain percentage level, it'll actually automatically book that person and have a conversation to book it into the hiring manager's calendar. It'll follow the interview and then give a scorecard after the interview. All that is now done by AI in a few different organizations. That is the reality of right now.
Yep. I think higher review and something.
So you need to figure out how to be different. And you got to be on the phone.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a security in what we do where, you know, you could theoretically have a bot do voice calls, right? Like we can already do that, right? But I think there's a security element where you will not want to employ that, especially within the intel space, but even within DoD, maybe civilian, you could do something like that. But I feel like when you're comparing commercial recruitment and GovCon, it's like comparing pickleball to jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, I play pickleball and Junius does jiu-jitsu, you know, totally different sports, right? Like he's, you know, he can kick my butt and I can hit a little ball over here. I would say I'm commercial staffing and Junius is GovCon, right? He can grapple. He can probably chokehold really well. And I can run around and hit a little plastic ball. So, I mean, I'm not trying to degrade commercial recruitment, but yeah, AI is going to, you know, what Ben's saying is not astonishing. TA is going to be completely automated on the commercial side. GovCon will be the last standing grace, especially doing intel of old school.
OFCCP.
Yeah. OFCCP, baby. Audit. And you do not, you do not want bots calling your IC professionals. I swear to God, that's going to be I'm telling you, that's going to be a lawsuit because who's behind that bot? It may not be Ben doing staffing who's sitting in the U.S., contiguous U.S. It could be somebody in a country we don't want that's setting that up as a spear phishing
I think the GovCon space is going to be like a little more protected from this AI automation and stuff. It's just, I don't think most recruiters are realizing how fast this AI is coming at them and how fast it's changing.
Well, they talked about that, and I do think it is important for people to be staying aware of the technology that's in their space, of the enhancements, right? Because they need to be able to adapt. And that's one of the things I know we talked about a little bit earlier ago is like, well, what do you look for in, recruiters and sourcers? And it's amazing to me. I always ask the question of, how do you stay up to date on the sourcing and recruiting industry? Like, how do you stay up to date on industry trends? Like, and I always pay attention to hear their answers. And, a lot of times you'll hear some very kind of, generic, answers. And it's surprising because, I was a novice and was able to like quickly find like who the thought leaders were and get plugged into those groups. And that instrumentally accelerated my career as a result of that. And I don't say that to toot my horn. I say that because, that same mindset is what's going to help people adapt to the technologies and the shifting realities of the industries that they're in, right? Like, because to your point, Ben, if you're not out there staying up to date about what's going on in your industry from a technological advancement standpoint, or shifts in preference, or just shifts in the competitive ecosystem, so that way you can, evaluate how am I stacking, right? How is my posture right now within my organization providing value in such a way that my organization, or do I need to shift something? Do I need to prioritize some things? Like, am I skilled in such a way that these skills are fading and I need to upskill in some other ways so that way I have value to the organization into the future? Like, that's just being intentional about your career.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I know, Junius, like you and I kind of did similar tracks. Like, we both went and got, a myriad of OSINT certs. Like I took Gates at the Pentagon. You did. I mean, you like tripled up on me, but we both went that OSINT route early on, because we saw like ahead of the curve, like where it was going, and like we got ahead, and so it's interesting. Like, what are you going to add to your tool belt, self-study or certification wise, to stay ahead of that, this head of that curve, where things are going, especially as it applies to AI. But some of this AI stuff.
Well, I really like what you said there, Justen. Self-study.
Sure.
Self-study.
Yeah, self-study.
Because a lot of times people think it's, hey, study while I'm on the job. Or if my company's not paying for it, then why am I doing it? Right? Like, I'm just being honest here. Like, we've seen that, right? And we're just like,
no doubt.
You're missing the boat. Like, this is not punitive. This is what you need to do to stay ahead and to bring value, right? Like, we've all heard that that study, CEOs maybe spend less than 4 hours a week watching TV. But what are they doing all that extra time? They're reading the Wall Street Journal. They're reading like articles about their industry. They're going to meet and greets. They're doing things intentionally to invest in their careers. So that's kind of what we're talking about, is that's what you have to do to get ahead and bring that immense value and be able to be agile and shift as the things will shift.
I mean,
they're listening to this podcast.
Oh, I would.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it transcends TA. I think we're at a paradigm shift, beyond just talent acquisition, where you need to be a continuous learner. If you're not a continuous learner, there's probably a problem. And that could be manufacturing. That could be, a totally different industry outside talent acquisition. The continuous learner will survive. The AI revolution that is coming, that is not just going to be the talent acquisition HR space, right? So, I think that's what we're getting to is be a continuous learner, be curious. If you need to pivot early, fail early.
Well,
And
let me you have to kind of like bet on yourself. Like, once I moved up to DC, I hate to say this, I never wanted to be, after like one stint, I never actually wanted to be like an internal recruiter. I always wanted to stay a contractor when I was working for a lot of these like, big government contractors, just paid by the time. especially when I'm working like 80, 90 hours a week and like crushing it. But one of the things I had to do, like when I first started actually learning about recruiting and stuff like that, there was a SourceCon. I was like, what the hell is a SourceCon community? Like, learning about sourcing and all that stuff. So I shot it over to the company. I was like, hey, I'd love to go to this. And they're like, no. So what I did is I took unpaid vacation time. So as a contractor, you don't get paid for vacation. So I'm like, hey, I'm going on this trip. Went to SourceCon, paid for it myself, came back. And then I was just like, I actually put together some classes. I'm like, hey, here's some of the stuff that I learned from this sourcing community that I think we can implement across the entire community, like the entire recruiting, like, all the recruiters. After like 2 or 3 classes, they came back and actually reimbursed me for my entire trip. And if it, you have to take the bets on yourself for you to actually get ahead.
Yeah. I think it's, I think that's the right mentality, like, that you need to have. Not everyone has that. So,
Hey, have you guys seen? I did have a question for you that I wanted to post because I thought it was interesting. Have you guys seen the state of security clearance process that came out from Clearance Jobs?
Not yet.
So it came out a little bit ago, but looks like as of like Q2, that the numbers that they have is that there's about 5.2 million clearance holders in America. Out of generally, I think our workforce is in between like 150 to 200 million people. So yeah, it's a really small percentage. And out of that, only 26%, so like 1/4, is held by contractors. So 36% is active duty, 18% is DoD civilian, and 20% is Guard Reserve. So out of the 5.2, we're all fighting for the 1/4. And those people who are leaving active duty to become, available, or people who are in the reserve. So, maybe there's 46% that we could potentially tap into, but that's still not a lot.
Yeah.
So for all the work we got out there.
The elusive sponsorships, Junius. Remember, we could still sponsor sometimes, right? I mean,
yeah, we can still sponsor. But, I bring that up because, Ben, you mentioned that you kind of brought in as like the last line of defense. So, like, what are some of the challenges that you normally hear from your partners about why there's a need to bring in external staffing? Is it because maybe ineffectiveness on their team? Is it because of maybe there's smaller organizations that, they don't have the, they haven't made the investment in a full life cycle talent solution internally? Like, what are you, from your perspective, what have you seen?
I mean, some of the biggest things is just like, we get calls and like, well, our recruiters can't do this, or they're not good enough. And I'm like, pause. Like, I know there's many like external recruiters that like part of their sales pitch is like how bad the internal recruiters are. I'm like, no, if you're a GovCon recruiter, you're good. If you're not a GovCon, if you're not good, you're out of the space. So, I always try to stay away from like any arguments about that. But really, it's like a lot of the internal recruiters they have too much, not enough time in the day. They're in too many meetings. Like, they just many times don't have enough time to recruit. So that's one reason. Secondly, we all know the joys of government contracting and how like why sometimes things aren't filled. And we have to sit there and look at it. And like, there are times that we have to tell a company, no, this is really because you guys bid it to win it, not bid it to fill it. And I get it. Like, if you bid it to fill it, you might not have won it, but you bid it so low, it's unexecutable. So, we've even come in a few times like, no, like, actually your talent acquisition recruiters are correct. Like, you guys, this is going to be such a hard thing. And, typically we walk away from it working but we try to here's what the internal recruiters need to do. So it's really just, most of the time there's too much going on and the recruiters just don't have enough bandwidth. And that's the core issue of why we're actually called, even though for many times it's so many other like surface level issues, but the core is the poor recruiter, or if they have a recruiter, the poor recruiter is overworked with not enough resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that a lot. I mean, I know companies that, they have almost like a figurehead as their function.
Well,
and it's like the person's like the manager and the contributor, and it's also like, because it depends on the scale of the organization, right? And so, yeah, they have to be able to bring in resources So that makes sense. I know that's out there, and because a lot of times, like, how often are you working with like really large companies? Does that happen often, or is it more like
Not often.
mid to small, medium size?
It's mostly small to medium companies. Like a lot of times, like I hate to say this, like the larger GovCon, it's just too many hoops for us to jump through, or too many hoops for us to even want to jump through to be able to play this little game. The real impact that we typically have is this small to mids where they've never invested in a recruiter. If they have a recruiter, they haven't invested in them, or they've hired a recruiter and they realize that they think of recruiting as just like an administrative function rather than they don't understand that they are an actual staffing company. Like if you're a government contractor and you're like actually filling position, if you're making something, if you're building a software, guess what? You're government contract. But if you're not doing that, you're really just a staffing company, and you need to think like a staffing company, and you need to hire like a staffing company. And you can like try to hire a recruiter for like $30K or $50K. No, you're going to fail. You're missing out hundreds of millions of dollars because you're not investing in recruiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's wild. That's wild.
TA needs to be locked in step with BD. If you're not locked in step, with BD and capture in this space, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's a lot of teams don't realize that. Us recruiters realize that. That's why I always like recruiting shouldn't really be part of HR. It should be part of like operations and business development in the GovCon space, because recruiting is the engine that makes this business happen.
I would defer a little bit on that, only because there are some compliance issues that definitely are HR related. But I understand what you're saying. To your point, regardless of whether
you have to worry about my stuff though, Junius, because he's stabbed. That's
what do you mean?
We got to worry about that, right? Stabbed. See,
we do.
The litigation.
I get to come in for the fun and leave for that kind of stuff.
You leave before you have to worry about that.
Be like audit what CCT. He's just like slinging. So I mean, I think that's that's the delineation. He gets to do that, and we gotta. We do have to worry a little bit more on the others. I mean, we have to be on our dot our I.
Oh man,
geez, man.
Yeah, we got a lot of things. We got the hoops we got to make sure that are taken care of before we can get the position even posted.
No,
but and there's one quick thing. There's one quick thing that I think Justen actually talked about this before we hit record, that you need to also, when you're working with an external company, understand the human capital supply chain. They're not going to tell you if they have overseas VAs. They're not going to tell you if they have recruiters overseas. That's not, they're going to say everybody is here in the US. I cannot tell you how many emails and calls I get from other staffing agencies that don't realize that I'm a recruiter too. And then I look at the LinkedIn profile of the person that's calling me. It says Fairfax. It says Ashburn. It says, but then they're on the phone asking me about a TSSCI and a full skill poly, which I don't have. I'm a recruiter. And they're like, oh, where are you at? Well, I'm in Ashburn. I'm like, okay. Yeah, you go a little deeper and have a conversation. Like, no, I'm in India. I'm in the Philippines. I'm over in all these other places. If you are looking at hiring a recruiting agency, and this isn't a pitch for me, you need to, and you're in the GovCon space, you're in the cleared space, and you care about the mission. We're not going to send our components over to China to be built into our space. We're not sending them to Russia to get built. We're not doing all that. It has to be the same thing in recruiting and hiring and talent acquisition. You cannot be sending all your work overseas, having overseas people build up these entire databases where they could just walk away, and now they have hundreds and hundreds of full scope poly professionals in their pocket.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Junius,
go ahead, Justin.
We had the director of security on, and we were talking about supply chain, which
So
I concur with everything Ben just said, but I think it's a step further in that you cannot have, and I'm going to be this simple, you cannot have non-U.S. citizens recruiting and sourcing for high-level cleared personnel. I think it's really just that simple. And, the case can be made for civilian federal agencies that maybe that's a lesser risk. I'm not, a security officer. I don't determine that. But to Ben's point, if I'm engaging or we're engaging with a staffing agency, you need to do your due diligence and make sure they're fully vetted. Ben's organization, this is not me promoting his organization, but I'm just saying, U.S. based. I looked up his background, everything's U.S. based, works with his wife, they're accredited, right? So I'd rather work with a mom and pop or a husband and wife, so to speak, say mom and pop, but husband and wife, that's U.S. based than some conglomerate that's going to outsource to XYZ country and spam the world with my organization, which, by the way, hurts your brand. That's going to hurt your organization in the long run. And I get those emails every day, like, hey, I have a full scope database administrator job. I'm like, I'm not a DBA, number one, right? Don't have a poly, number two. And why are you messaging me? And then I look and they're not in the US. Okay. So that can work in commercial. I have nothing against that in commercial. I'm not speaking to that, but as it applies to our industry, supply chain security, that's a major risk. And we do need to look at that. Look at our staffing partners and I'm talking at the security level. I'm talking, CHRO level, right? I mean, that's an issue, but Ben's organization checks out. We're good.
I mean, it was like always like the frustrating, even when I was an internal recruiter, it was like always the frustrating thing. Like you get on the phone and like, you're like, wait, you're over in the Philippines. Like you're calling me about full scope poly work. Like it just like, we just can't be doing that. Like, I'd love for a certification process.
That will literally degrade, and everything Junius knows is his brand. So you're going to put in millions of dollars into developing brand, and then you're going to outsource to save money on TA over here, and you're going to degrade all that brand. I would call it political capital. So you're under.
That's for sure.
For a quick save, but
I mean, we always joke around like here at the house, like every now and then, like we should just leave GovCon. Like we could go actually have a VA if we like leave the GovCon space and like go chase like the easier money. But back at the end of the day, like how we started this podcast interview, this conversation, like we understand the mission that we're part of. We understand like what we're doing, and it's something that just feeds our soul, and it's the reason that why we stay GovCon recruiters.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's why I'm in it. Like there's been times I've kind of thought about like, hey, would it be difference? Like, and the only thing I could think of that I think would be just from a personal perspective, like would feel like as gratifying would be maybe like if I worked in like healthcare, like in terms of directing recruitment strategy and like healthcare, that kind of thing, because you are trying to place doctors and like people are going to save lives, right? So like that has a certain appeal. But I mean, I'll be honest with you, I have enjoyed the ride of my GovCon career and have no motivating desire to try to leave anytime soon. So, but that's for another discussion. But I did want to Ben, before we wrap things up, I did want to ask you a question about how things are going with Select Source, like what's next for you, like this upcoming year, and wanted to kind of give you some time to kind of chat through that.
So man, what's up next for Select Source? So we're actually looking at maybe shifting more towards the like executive recruiting. That's one of the things that we're like retooling and really looking at like the things that we're doing. Also, like I have another podcast also. So that does eat up, we'll say maybe about 10% of my time. It's called the Elite Recruiter Podcast. Yeah. And I've actually been putting on like a few events. Like I just got done with the Recruiting Growth Summit, Finish the Year Strong. Just got done the month before that in August, putting together an AI summit that had like 27 talks about the recruiting space. Luckily, the crazy thing is I'm able to utilize technology and like all these tools to like run these summits while still actually working a recruiting desk.
Yeah, nice. Well, see, that's what we're talking about. You can use it to your benefit. You just got to know how to use it.
Yeah.
Like,
that's great.
Like the last one, like if you want to get laugh, like, I do like the introduction, like, this person's going to be talking about LinkedIn automation, LinkedIn PowerPunch and this and that, and then let them go, turn off my camera. And then like 5 seconds later, I'm like on the phone with a candidate while they're talking.
Love it. That's what we need, that ingenuity there. But yeah, that's awesome, Ben.
But yeah, we're excited about the future. Super grateful that you guys invited me onto this podcast. Like, I really the biggest thing I want recruiters to actually walk away with is like, understand your value, understand what you bring to the table, understand the impact that you have as a recruiter. And once you internalize that and understand it, you go from moving from a recruiter to the consultant.
Yep. That's what it's all about. Justen, how about you? Any closing remarks on your end?
Yeah, I just think, keeping yourself mission focused, understanding what you're working and translating the position you're working at a micro level to something, macro, like where does that fit? If you're placing Army medic, if you're placing somebody IT, building a missile, well, who is that supporting? And you may look geopolitically. So looking at yourself micro level, and where do I fit within the macro level, and understanding that, and then remaining mission focused. I think that's really important. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just say, just for me, like, pick up the phone, like Ben said, old school is new school. And, really staying like, Justen, you also said it too. You said it really well. And I liked it. Just staying curious, right? Like if you're in talent acquisition in the GovCon space, or I would just say just in general, if you're in talent acquisition and you're not staying curious to learn, like really to take control over your career, to, let your actions be the determining factor of where you can go in your career. And one of the ways that you can have ownership over your career is through that self-development, your own professional development to upskill, right? Like we all have things to get better at.
Oh, yeah.
And, and by only, paying attention to the things that we're good at and never focusing on the things that we, maybe are not strengths, like you're inadvertently setting limits to your trajectory of what you can accomplish, right? Like you have to work on those areas that maybe aren't the things that are most comfortable to you. So, if picking up the phone is something that is kind of scary, right? Then do it, right? Connect with people. Like there's people like Ben, people like me, Justen. There's so many people that are out there on Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups that readily put like, recruiting daily, like SourceCon, right? Like ChartTX. I mean, there's so many vendors out there that are, Greg Hawkes is someone that comes to mind because he does like amazing videos on YouTube. But reach out to the community and talk to people who have been successful and or have strengths in different areas.
Yep.
To find out, like, well, how did you do it? Like, like Ben, the reason why I wanted you on the call was because I wanted, maybe there are some in-house recruiters out there who maybe think to themselves, I'd like to do my own thing at some point. How would I do that? Right. So now they know a resource, like reach out to Ben, right? Like reach out to him. He can kind of say like, hey, here's my path that I took, right? Just like there's maybe people out there that, have interest in getting into GovCon and, they haven't been in that industry and, then you would reach out to me because I made that transition with no experience and, not to toot my own horn, but was able to out recruit people who had been doing it for 10 years very quickly, right? Because I had a background in sourcing. I just had to pick up the cleared lingo. And so there are people out there. And so that's just kind of like my PSA that I just wanted to throw out there because I think that's how we all get better and we all learn from each other. There's things that Justen does way better than I. And I will reach out to Justen and be like, hey, like what's going, like what, like, right? So, it's, you never reach the top and you're like, oh, I figured it all out. Like, that's just not what happens, right? Like, there's people like, there's OGs like Dean DaCosta, right? Like Justen that, like he's always like talking about new tools and new this, new that. So like, if you're going to be in talent acquisition, you kind of need to be a consistent learner because it's never going to stop evolving.
No doubt. Yeah, I agree.
Well, guys, wonderful episode. Thanks, audience, for checking out this latest episode of GovCon Heroes, Talent Unleashed. And until next time.